What needs to happen is basically crazy. We need to do 20x or 30x the speed, and it's exciting on an individual level. What you can act on is basically the food you eat, the way you move around, the where you live. When you work on all of the different aspects and you insulate, plus change the windows, plus change the heating system, and you do that at a high quality, then you can hope to divide your bill by 4, 5, 6, sometimes 10. Then it's like you can divide by 10 times your CO2 emissions. So maybe it's a good time to share the 5 biggest reasons why people do energy retrofits. Honestly, if you talk to people about their passion, they're going to be happy to talk to you. So don't be afraid to ask for help. It's a pretty hard because you have to be at the same time super convinced of your idea, because you're going to speak to potential customers, to partners, and on the other you have to be always judging and doubting your idea, because you don't want to be going on the wrong direction.
Welcome to today's episode. We're speaking with Alban, co-founder at Diabolo. We'll discuss his early entrepreneurship journey and why he believes real estate agents could be a key player in helping decarbonize the houses we live in. Hope you enjoy the conversation. All right. Hi, Alban. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining. To start with, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Alban. I live in Paris, and I'm pretty passionate about climate change and entrepreneurship, among other things. I'm the co-founder of a startup called Diabolo. We're based in Paris, and we are working on accelerating energy retrofits in France. So I'm sure we could get into more details, but that's basically the gist of it. And then other than that, I'm passionate about nature, the mountains.
So to start with, you already mentioned a term that's quite interesting. What are energy retrofits?
So basically, the housing sector uses a lot of energy and has a lot of CO2 emissions in France and globally. And one, if not the biggest ways that we can improve this, is through energy retrofits. And basically that means that you take a house or an apartment that is poorly insulated and that is heated with fossil fuels, and you bring in new insulation that is much more efficient, and you change the heating source with a new electricity-based heating source, for example, that is much less emissive in terms of CO2. So in France, there's like almost the vast majority of homes and apartments are still heated with gas and fuel, and they are very poorly insulated. And there's actually a word in France that says, like, basically a lot of houses are just, they have holes almost in it. The cold goes through in the winter. So what needs to happen is big increase in the rates of energy retrofits. So workers come in and put new insulation on the walls, change your heating system, and that allows us to need much less energy to keep our homes working and to have much less CO2 emissions for homes. And right now we're not going at the speed we need to go at. One funny number is that the French government said that if we want to be on the Paris Accords, the 2 degrees goal by 2050, we need to do 1 million energy retrofits, performance energy retrofits, so like quality ones, per year. 1 million per year. And do you want to try and guess how many we did last year?
I mean, given the way things are going across all sectors when it comes to achieving our 2050 goals, I'm assuming it's a pretty bad number. I'm going to say maybe 200,000.
It's 70,000. 70,000.
Wow.
And
That's not even 10%.
not even 10%. And the way they count is pretty generous. So like what needs to happen is basically crazy. We need to like do 20x or 30x the speed, and it's exciting. There's so many things that slowing this down. It's expensive, it's hard, it's technical, but it's an exciting space to be in.
Very interesting. When you mentioned the housing sector being a significant contributor to carbon emissions in general, if you think about France or maybe Europe, what
Yeah.
percentage of overall carbon emissions do you think come from real estate or housing?
So in the French level, the housing sector as a whole is basically 1/3 of the energy use and 1/3 of the CO2 emissions.
Wow.
So right on the top three list with the transportation and the food. Like, and as on an individual level, what you can act on is basically the food you eat,
Hmm.
the way you move around by car, plane, or by bike, or the where you live, and how much energy and CO2 emissions come from your home. So it's right on the top three list, let's say.
Wow. Okay. I had no idea that it was that big a contributor. And when you talk about retrofitting, traditional gas heating with electric heating, what's the percentage reduction that you're expecting from a high quality or
Yeah.
performance retrofit? What
Yeah.
percentage in CO2 intensity would it reduce if you made the switch?
Yeah. So I guess there's two things that people are looking for. I mean, on a global level, we're trying to reduce emissions and reduce in energy use. So
Hmm.
that's one thing. And then on a personal level, people are looking to reduce their energy bills. That's very measurable. It's in euros, so it's
Yeah.
pretty simple. And one thing to have in mind is that most of energy retrofits happening today are like one gesture. So you will change your windows, or you will add insulation on one wall, or you will change your heating system, but you do just one thing. And this one thing, the impact it has is pretty limited. And one of the big reasons is the rebound effect. If I change my heating system and now I have an electric heat pump, it's super nice. Maybe I used to heat at like 18 degrees because it was super expensive to heat yourself at 20. So like I was limiting myself and it was cold in the winter. Now that I have a brand new heat pump, oh, it's nice. I can afford to heat my home at 21 degrees. So actually, your emissions and your energy use might be the same or even higher. So there's a rebound effect when you do just one gesture. But
Very interesting.
when you work on all of the different aspects and you insulate plus change the windows plus change the heating system, and you do that on a at a high quality, there's a lot of rules that you need to respect to have a performance. Then you can hope to divide your electricity bill by 4, 5, 6, sometimes 10. CO2 emissions, it's about the same level. A lot of homes are still heated in France with fuel. So it's like this big tank that you have in your garden that's with basically petrol, oil, and that's obviously fossil fuels. And when you heat your home, it's a lot of emissions. And when you change that to an electric system and you have an efficient home, then it's like you can divide by 10 times your CO2 emissions. So it's pretty incredible what can happen, but we need to be aiming for quality energy retrofits.
That's tremendous. 10 times is a huge, huge reduction. And
It's a huge reduction, but it's not the standard. As I was saying,
mhm,
is it's not what most people observe, because
yeah.
most energy retrofits are not ambitious, but we need to be aiming towards that.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, even if that is the theoretical maximum, it's good to know. If let's take a theoretical home somewhere in France, three-bedroom house, which would typically be using this petrol heating system, old school windows, which are not super insulating. If you were to take such a house, what would be the cost for a family to do a full energy retrofit approximately
Yeah,
in such a home? All of the work, so insulation, electric system, etc.
it's basically in the range of 50 to 100,000 euros, and it can go upwards pretty easily. But if you want to do a quality work, it's 80,000 euros for a home, a random home, to do a quality energy retrofit. So it's a
Oh,
lot of money.
it is. And in terms of, you said there'd be lower energy costs overall because you're not using, hopefully, as much heating. Do you have a sense of how long it would take a family to recover as close to all of the costs as possible?
So the thing is, and there has been a lot of analysis on this. It takes quite a long time. Some people say 20 years, 25 years. It obviously depends a lot on so many factors, but basically, if you want to finance the energy retrofit with the cost savings from your energy bill, it's going to take 20, 25 years. And the average ownership of a house in France is about 8 to 10 years, I believe. So most people aren't going to like see that. But there's an interesting thing is that in France we have something called the DPE, which is the sort of a letter of the energy efficiency of your home, and it goes from A to G. A
Mhm.
is the most efficient home, G is the least efficient home. And obviously, if you're selling your home tomorrow, if your home is G, it's going to be sold much less than if it's A or B. So when you're renovating your home, when you're doing an energy retrofit, you're reducing your energy bill, but you're also increasing the value of your home. And so if you're going to sell it tomorrow, you're going to sell it better than you would have sold it if you didn't do energy retrofits. So maybe it's a good time to share, like, I guess, the five biggest reasons why people do energy retrofits.
Sure.
So reducing your bill is one, as we said. Increasing the value of your home is the second. Then there is the comfort. In France, there's like about 10% of people who can't afford to heat themselves in the winter. So they live in poverty, energy poverty, basically. And some kids like have illnesses because of that. Comfort. If you do an energy retrofit, you're going to have a much more comfortable home. And that's true for the winter, but that's also true for the summer, because what's going to happen is hotter summers,
Hmm.
and if your home is poorly insulated, you're going to have a hard time living in your own home. So that's a really important part. So comfort is
Interesting.
the third. The fourth is the impact you can have. That's not necessarily the biggest reason, but a lot of people are kind of scared of the news about climate change, and it's a bit hard to fathom. And if you act, it's a good way to feel better. And actually, energy retrofits is a good way to act on your own emissions, because if you renovate, you have a lower impact. So that's the fourth argument. And the fifth is kind of the most basic one, is laws. Basically, in France, there's laws that almost force you to do energy retrofits. And so if you have an apartment that's on the G scale, you won't be able to rent it starting for the 1st of January. So people just do energy retrofits because they don't have a choice necessarily. So
And what's the
those are the.
minimum threshold to get it to rentable?
So you have to go to F,
Okay.
which is the next letter. Then F is going to be 2028. If you want to rent an apartment that has a letter F in 2028, you won't be able to. Then 2034 is the E. So they're like pushing, and that's quite honestly, France is pretty advanced in this sense, because no other country is doing that, and it's pushing. It had a huge impact on the the amount of people talking about energy retrofits and the speed of energy retrofits, because people are like, oh, I need to I need to renovate my home because I won't be able to rent it. So that's a very easy way to see that the government has a huge impact, because if they put laws that force people to do stuff, then people will do stuff. So it's obviously something we want to encourage.
And with government, there's always two ends to it, right? There's the sticks, which is the laws, like the ones you
Yeah,
mentioned. There's also carrots. So does
yeah,
the French government currently have any sort
yeah,
of incentive scheme or subsidy scheme, given
yeah.
it costs almost 100,000 euros to make these changes?
There's a 4 billion euro carrot annually. There's financial aid for homeowners to do energy retrofits. It's been existing for a couple years now, and the amounts have increased recently. And basically, it depends on your income. But if you do quality energy retrofits, even if you are even if you have a 1 million annual salary, you'll be able to have financial aids for your energy retrofits, and it's based on a percentage of the total amount of the cost. And basically, for people with the lowest incomes, it can go up to 90% of the cost that is taken care of. So that's a great carrot, as you say, and it's a great way to push people to do energy retrofits. Obviously, it's kind of hard to get because it's a lot of administrative work, but I mean, if you have the willingness to go forward with your energy retrofits, then you can have great subsidies in France, and that makes a big difference.
Definitely. And to your point, you briefly did mention a little while ago that France is maybe slightly ahead of some other countries, even within the EU, in when it comes to both giving carrots and sticks for energy retrofits. Are there some other countries that you've seen either in the EU or globally that are similarly pushing a bit further ahead on making houses energy efficient, or do you think France is slightly better than most?
To be honest, I don't have a great understanding of what other countries are doing. I know that Spain, for example, just launched the obligation to have the letter when you sell a home. that was the first step. Is like when you sell a home, you
Yeah.
have to have someone come and analyze your home and say what's the letter. And I think Spain just introduced that, but France having it being forbidden to rent your apartment if the letter is G starting next January, that's definitely unique to France. And it's a kind of a gamble, because obviously if you put too much pressure and too many laws, then people are going to go on the streets. French
Yeah.
people are pretty experts on going on the streets. So it's almost like a test for Europe, because European legislation might get inspired by what France is doing in a good and a bad way. Like if we have done some mistakes, Europe is gonna adjust itself, obviously.
Yeah. This might be a bit of a tangent from everything you're saying, but is rooftop solar also a push in France? Because I'm imagining, in a theoretically ideal sense, you go back to that same 3 bedroom house we were talking about, and you put an electric heating system insulation, and then you put solar panels on top. I'd imagine that should theoretically accelerate the ROI. So the time it takes to recover the money, because now you're also generating electricity. Are these sort of combination solutions something that's being talked about as well, or not so much?
It's been pushed in France quite a bit. Germany is quite ahead of us, for example. Other countries are much ahead of us. But there's a lot of startups that have been created recently to make it easier for people to install solar panels on their roofs. And I think their ROI is also is a bit shorter. So there are also some very innovative ways to finance energy retrofits. This is also a tangent, but I saw a startup working on this where they will install a solar panel on your roof for free, but they will receive the money from the production of the electricity for 10 years. In exchange, when they install the solar panels, they'll give you like 10 or 15K, which is the expected revenue from the 10 years. And that's going to help you finance your energy retrofits. So essentially, you're like renting your roof for free, but you're having this extra financial help to do an energy retrofit. And so there are a lot of innovative ways to finance energy retrofits, but
Super
there can be
interesting.
some combinations between solar and energy retrofits. Yeah.
Yeah, super interesting model. Do you know if it's already seeing traction? Is this based in France or is it elsewhere?
Yeah, it's funny. I spoke to the guy working on this, and it's pretty recent. And they're focused on lower income people, because they're looking for, even if they have the 90% government subsidies, then the 10% for some people is still like 5K for some people is still obviously
Of
way
course.
too much. And so, but I think their biggest hurdle for their development is that people think it's too good to be true. People think it's too good to be true, so they don't. They're like afraid and like, oh, I don't believe this, and they aren't moving forward. So it's always sometimes surprising what the hurdles are going to be. And in this case, I think is people are scared of this weird new scheme, which makes sense, but for some people, it's just too good to be true.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have imagined that to be a problem, because normally you're trying to build products that are more and more, service oriented. But it's interesting to see that you can go too far and then start to also create suspicion.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Okay, so we've spent some time understanding energy retrofits. I'd love to take a step back and look at Diabolo. So, where in this ecosystem of energy retrofits and this transition in France does your organization sit?
Yeah, so Diabolo, we're two of us, my co-founder Victor and I, and basically what we're working on is we are training real estate agents on energy retrofits. And why are we doing that? Because through our many interviews, what we've realized is that it's much easier to do an energy retrofit when you're moving in, when you're buying a house, than when you're already occupying it, because financially you're already talking with your bank to have a loan to buy the house. You're not emotionally attached to this painting or whatever. The apartment is empty, so it's much easier to do the construction work. And you're already going to do some aesthetic construction work. For example, you're going to improve your kitchen or whatever, so it's easier to do also energy retrofits. So for all of those reasons, if we want to be accelerating the energy retrofits, we have to almost make it that every person that's buying a poorly insulated home buys it and renovates it. That's the goal, because it's much easier. And the first person you're talking to when you're buying a poorly insulated home is the real estate agents. They're the ones who are opening the door and helping you visit the home or the apartment. And today, real estate agents they're not technical, they're not necessarily experts, and it's very hard to help the people buying those homes. And people buying those homes are asking so many questions because so many people are talking about these subjects. So our goal is to train, to make to make real estate agents much more comfortable with this subject, so that they can help as much the buyers and the sellers of these homes, and make it easier for the energy retrofit to happen. So we're doing 1 day training, so 7 hours physically for now. We've done quite a bit, a couple in the last weeks, and we're hoping to do maybe 30, 50 before the end of the year. Now, that's kind of ambitious. Let's say 20 before the end of the year. And yeah, so it's pretty exciting. We've had some partnerships with some real estate, let's say, groups that have a big network of real estate agents, so that we can distribute our training session. And yeah, that's about it.
I'm just trying to think. So, if a real estate agent did come in for one of these trainings and understood what it means to get their energy retrofit done, the incentive for them to actually go out and then enable it in their next transaction? Do you
Yeah.
also provide connections, for example, to retrofit technology experts,
Yeah.
installation experts? How does that part of it get facilitated, the actual implementation?
Yeah. That's a great question. What problem are we solving for the real estate agents? Basically, today the energy retrofit subject is a problem for them because transactions are taking longer, and they're much more complicated if the home is a G or an F, on that scale.
Okay.
It's much more complicated. They have to do more work. They have to be more convincing, and it's annoying for them. So what we're doing is two things. We're making it easier for them to differentiate themselves, and they can be much more comfortable. Like if you're selling your home and three different real estate agents are coming in to visit and to say, "Oh, I'm going to be the best person to sell your home." If one is so much better in the energy retrofit aspect, and your home is going to be hard to sell for that reason, then you're going to be comfortable to give them the house. So that's the first part. The second part is with the people buying the home, and here the one thing they want to do is to make people more reassure people that, okay, I know it's a home that's a G on the scale. You're gonna have to do some energy retrofit, but I know what I'm doing. I have the good network, and I'm gonna do you some introductions. It's gonna be okay. I'm gonna help you calculate how much government subsidies you're gonna be able to have. It's gonna be okay. So being trained on the subject basically is allowing them to sell faster, and and to have less work to do. And one of the things we're doing, as you said, is to introduce them to local actors from the energy retrofit sector that are going to be able to help them do their job. So it's as much of a question of ability and of a question of network, basically.
Yeah, I can see how if you're a real estate agent and you come in with the entire solution saying, I'll get you the contractor, so the person will install it, and I know the process to get the subsidy done. So, the complex paperwork can be taken care of. Both of those combined can be quite an interesting value proposition for sellers and buyers. Just because, I mean, that significantly changes the value of the house that's changing hands. Very cool. And do you think there is sufficient availability of technical contractors to do this kind of work across the country, or do you think that's
Not
a
necess-
limited skill right now?
that's one of the reasons why energy retrofit is not moving fast enough, is because there's not enough workforce. And there are a bunch of startups working on this as well. What Diabolo is doing is we're training people who are close to the energy retrofit space, but not their job is not to do energy retrofit. They're real estate agents. Their job is to sell a home. But there's a bunch of companies working on training workers, training salesmen, training installators to do the job when the contract is signed. So There's so many things that need to be moving together to allow us to move faster with the this big ambitious energy project.
Very cool. And yeah, it sounds like a huge challenge because I think, like you're saying, knowledge is one part of it, but then the other part is actually getting it done. Do you have a sense of how many houses bought slash sold per year in France, roughly?
It's a bit short of 1 million 1 million units.
Okay. So basically, when we think about the 1 million a year that the
Yeah,
France government was saying, essentially, if every single house is retrofitted at sale, you achieve it through those transactions.
That's correct. Although some of the houses that are sold are already pretty efficient,
Good. Yeah.
energetically speaking. So we need to be also renovating houses from people who aren't selling and buying. But if every home that is bought that is poorly insulated is renovated, that would already be a pretty big win.
Is there regional disparity in France in terms of some regions having worse off insulation than others? So is this
Yeah.
more of a regional problem as well?
Yeah, it depends. One of the big factors is the year of construction of the homes. One thing that's pretty interesting is that before the world wars, basically, we were constructing homes in a pretty smart way. So we were focusing on the orientation with the sun, on the natural materials, and so homes were pretty efficient naturally speaking. And then when we had the world wars, a bunch of homes were destroyed, and we had to build back super fast. And at that time, fossil fuels were super cheap, so we were building homes that we were super poorly insulated. And so when you look at the homes that were created between World War One and let's say the 1990s or something, uh, they are all most of them are very poorly insulated. And so we right now, that's a good segue also to another interesting thing is that
Yeah.
the houses that are constructed today are super efficient because there's a lot of laws that mean that if you build a new house today, it has to have insulation. It cannot have like fossil fuels or whatever. So it's already pretty efficient. So that's not necessarily the focus. And 75% of the houses in France in 2050 already exist today. So basically, this is the part we need to focus on. Like we're obviously building houses every year, but a big majority of the houses that will be there in 2050, which is when we need to be carbon neutral, already exist today. So those are the ones we need to focus on.
And it sounds like it's that cohort between 1950 and 1990 that needs the real transition as compared to the modern housing.
It's the big part. Yeah, I think it's about 2/3 of the poorly insulated houses are from that period. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. When you talk to real estate agents and you kind of train them on this and explain the problem to them, what's been your assessment of their willingness and awareness on this topic? Were they already aware, or is this something new? And do they see the value in this, or are you mostly seeing some resistance from their end to kind of work on this as a side of their
Yeah.
usual transaction?
It they're pretty annoyed by the subject, honestly. It's something that's slowing them down on their job. Their job is to sell homes, and energy retrofits and this whole subject is slowing them down. So they have a pretty negative feeling about it. But one thing that's interesting is real estate agents also don't necessarily, like most people still in France, Europe, and wherever, they haven't bought into climate change and they don't care necessarily. But what I've been trying to say also is that your job as a real estate agent has impact. And if you sell about 10 homes per year and half of them are poorly insulated, and if because of you those homes are insulated, then you have a pretty good impact. That's super exciting. You're taking part in this big challenge of reducing climate change. So it's one of the message we try to give them, but it's hard. Most people aren't super sensitive to that. So we our hope is that we're going to attract real estate agents just because we're going to make their job easier. That's all. And on a second, like indirectly, we're going to have an impact because they're going to be more inclined to do energy retrofits, and that's going to be good for the environment. But it's a indirect thing. We're not saying like, hey, do you want to be eco-friendly and help people renovate their homes? Like, I think we would have no real estate agents that way. We're just like, hey, it's super painful to take care of this subject. There's so many questions you've been asked. It's hard subject, right? Come in here. We're gonna help you be better at your job. Do this better, and indirectly, this is gonna have a positive impact.
Do you have any future state that you think in which, from offering the training, you would also offer a network of contractors who do this? And basically, like you're saying, real estate agents right now, what the problem you're trying to solve for them is to say transaction efficiency for houses that are in the G and F band. But if it changes to say it's not only that, but also if you use one of these network of contractors, you get a small commission of it, if it
Yeah,
gets successfully done. That financial incentive might push them more
yeah.
because already they work on a commission basis. So do you think there is a future in which
Mhm.
Diabolo would take part in enabling something like that?
That might be the end goal, honestly. Today, there's already like real estate agents are saying like, "Hey, I know a worker. He can do the job for your house that you're wanting to do. And if the worker has the contract, the worker will give like a couple $100 to the real estate agents, and that's a good relationship they have. But that's not necessarily legal. So we've been thinking about this, how to have some financial incentives for the real estate agents to enable the energy retrofits. And I think it's such a paradigm shift that it's going to take a while, and it's pretty hard to develop, because as of today, real estate agents, when they have sold a house, they move on to the next one. They don't care. I mean, they keep a bit of the net relationship with the buyer, because maybe he's going to want to sell in 10 years, so he will call you back. But they have no incentive in whatsoever. They have taken their commission. It's done. So having them incentivized to have some energy retrofit done is such a paradigm shift that it's hard to imagine it. But we think there's a future there, and I think if we want to have them truly passionate about the subject and moving forward, there has to be a financial incentive, but it's probably pretty hard. So we're looking into this, but it's going to take a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even for you, it might be interesting, right? Because if you think about a three-way commission structure where you bring the suppliers, real estate agents get some, Diabolo, it also becomes an additional revenue source for you. There might be
Yep.
something there, but yeah, quite cool to know that it's something you're
Yeah.
already thinking about.
Are
Coming
you
back
gonna
to
bi-
sorry.
are you gonna bill me for the consulting work here, or?
I'll bill only a success fee if this gets
Okay,
implemented. No, no,
great.
no other consulting fees beyond
All
that.
right, awesome.
So if I think back to right now, so is your revenue model primarily coming from that you charge agency owners? How does it work? What's your
Yeah.
current revenue model?
For now, if you want to be trained by Diabolo, it's about 250 euros for a 1 day training, and we train about 10 to 12 agents per session. So it's pretty simple. We pay our trainer, we pay our teacher a daily fee, and we get paid by the real estate agents. So for now, it's really simple. What the second part might be to have some products or services, either for the real estate agents or for the acquirers of the homes, and that could be like some almost consulting work to help people decide what construction work they want to be doing, helping the people buying the homes get the government subsidies. That's another opportunity. Maybe have a software that can allow the real estate agents to do a simulation of the energy retrofits when they arrive in the home. There's a lot of things we can think about that have a different model. Some of them could be on a subscription based, which obviously is pretty exciting as a startup because it's more scalable. But for now, it's really simple, just as a training fee.
Okay. And that it sounds like quite a simple and scalable model. Do you think you'd see yourself doing this outside of France as well, or do you think France is very much the focus of Diabolo? So if you think about future expansion, would you first go this model outside France, or would you rather go deep within France and expand your model in the country?
The latter.
Okay.
There's definitely a lot of things to do in France, and also an exciting thing is that France is pretty advanced in their regulation, and as I was saying, so before we I mean, if we're good in France, then we might be good in other countries because we already approved and tested some stuff. But before we've looked around everything that has to be done in France, I think it's going to take a while. We have some work to do already in France,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. I mean, it's a sound with 1 million houses needed to be changed a year. I think there's a
Yeah.
big enough challenge there.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We've talked a lot about Diabolo. I'd love to talk about your personal journey a bit as well. If
Yeah.
thinking about the last year as a climate entrepreneur and someone who's obviously been passionate about this for a lot longer, what do you think has been your highest, most exciting point in your journey so far?
I love the that I'm a climate entrepreneur. That sounds super fancy, but I think one exciting part is to be part of a community. That sounds a bit cheesy, but honestly, at least in Paris, there's a pretty small group, honestly, of people working on really the climate sector and building startups. And it's super exciting to meet new people and to see like, oh yeah, I know this guy. You should meet this guy. The other day, I was doing a random event and some guy was saying like, hey, we're looking into this new opportunity, and then 3 or 5 people were like, oh, you should speak to them, you should speak to this guy, and I was like, oh yeah, I know him too, you should speak to, like, there's a lot of you feel like in a small group of people working in the climate sector, and it's pretty exciting. And I'm quite surprised honestly about that. It's a small group of people. We should be so much more. So the listeners should definitely come and help us. But yeah, being part of this group of people working on this huge subject and working on different approaches to of the same goal, and you're like competitors but you're also partners, and you're just moving in the same direction. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah. And if I was to change gears a bit and ask you about what do you think has been sort of the most difficult or challenging aspect of your journey so far, what do you think that would be?
During the first months of the project, almost a year to be honest, I was alone on the project. Like, I decided to quit my previous job before having found co-founders, and Victor, who I found and who is my co-founder today, was excited to work with me, but he was in his current job, and basically it would take some time for him to be full time with me. And so I had a long days where I was the only one working on this project alone, and I had no one to talk to confront my ideas. When I finished a meeting with a potential customer or whatever, I wouldn't have anyone to like have a quick chat about, oh, this was interesting, we should change that, this was okay. You're just left alone like this, and you're like, okay, what am I doing now? So yeah, the hard part in the beginning is was to be alone, and some people are comfortable with that, and there are solo founders and they're super happy. And for me at least, I'm much more comfortable now that I have a co-founder that I can call whenever, and it's much easier. And I might have also another thing. It's a pretty hard because you have to be at the same time super convinced of your idea, because you're going to speak to potential customers, to partners, and you have to be super convincing. So on the one side you have to be extremely convinced, and on the other you have to be always sort of judging and doubting your idea, because you don't want to be going on the wrong direction. And so what happened, and what's happened for me in the third time in a row, is I sort of fell in love with my idea in the beginning, which had nothing to do with training real estate agents. And I had a hard time to say like, okay, this is not the right idea, I should change. And yeah, you have some people who are super excited of what you're doing and some people who don't care, and it's hard to find the signal between the noise.
Yeah. And do you think having a co founder helps with that a little bit? Because then it's not just you being deep into your idea, there's someone who maybe is not objective, but at least looks at it from a different perspective and can validate or disvalidate your ideas.
Definitely, definitely. And also I think there's people who are more comfortable than others, and I'm like a forever optimist. I just go for it, and like I think it's going to happen. My co-founder is naturally more pessimistic, which means we have a good balance between, because we see things differently. It's definitely hard to not have someone to bounce around ideas.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're quite sold on having co-founders versus going solo and trying to do things more quickly just on your own. Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. Last bit. You mentioned briefly to me that the community of climate founders is quite small in France. I'm imagining it's the same everywhere. And while that makes you tight knit, it does obviously bring out the bigger problem, which is that there aren't clearly not enough founders working on climate versus many other topics that exist. Do you have a sense of why that is? Do you think it's a function of there being more funding elsewhere versus climate, or do you think it's the fact that it's difficult to make a tangible business on climate? What's your view here?
I don't know, man. I don't know. It's frustrating, honestly, because you see it with AI. AI has had a huge boom for the last 2 years, and I feel like almost every founder right now is building an AI company. It's, I mean, a lot of new companies being built right now are focused on AI, and it's this buzzword, and people are excited about it. And I'm like, AI is interesting. It could be cool. So in some aspects, it's cool. It's also, I mean, dangerous, and we want to be taking our time because I feel like we're going a bit too fast. But feels very like short term. Like there's this AI boom. Oh, let's build a company here, where we have some societal and environmental problems that are super long term and that are threats to our existence as human beings. Like climate change is freaking serious, and we should all focus on this. It's hard to understand why most people aren't working on this. And I have a great friend. She's working on helping women go through menopause in a better way, because they're being coached and helped. And I think that's a really great subject to be working on. And it doesn't mean climate change is happening that you shouldn't be working on menopause. Menopause is a very important subject. But AI is great. Yeah, I don't know why people are excited, and you can raise funds super easily, and you can do your LinkedIn posts, and it's super exciting. But come on, guys, we guys and girls, we need to be working on the big stuff. And the big stuff is the climate change that's happening right now. Because if you read a bit of the news, then you understand that we need to be doing some stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And I do wonder if it just has to do with the feedback cycle sometimes. And that's not just on, with entrepreneurship, but just more generally keeping people connected with climate change and keeping it top of mind. It might just be that people don't see a direct cause and effect immediately. So they take a flight and they're like, oh, I emitted these many tons of CO2. But then at a separate time somewhere else, there'll be an actual climate disaster. And for them to make the
Yeah.
correlation that the climate disaster that they had 18 months later was partly contributed by CO2 that comes from flying. I think that just the cause and effect is so disconnected that I think having people keep it top of mind, unless you're super informed about it or care about it enough, can be hard. I
Yeah,
guess,
definitely.
yeah, yeah.
No, just to add on this, what makes people like want to contribute to reducing climate change is hard to understand. And I've been curious about this for a while, so I don't have an answer. But one thing I want to say is that there are so many things to be done that help reduce climate change. If you take, like, for example, the transportation industry, what I think what has helped me is to see like some prospective work that says that basically this is what should happen in the transportation industry, is like a reducing of cars, a reducing of airplanes, more trains, more bicycles, more carpooling or whatever. And you have these big long-term changes that need to be happening, and then you can focus on one thing, which is, okay, we need more bicycles, so you can build a bicycle company, and you find a way to contribute to this big long-term change that needs to be happening. And like, this is an example for the transportation sector. The food sector, basically, we need to be having a bit less meat, a bit more vegetables. We need to be having more local food. These are the big like trends, and you can subscribe to a trend. You can work on a trend with your company by fixing one problem inside this big trend, and there are so many things to be done.
Yeah, and one thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately is also just the fact that you don't just want to make it climate friendly, you want to make it fundamentally better. So what I mean by that is, like, Tesla is a great example, right? It's not just an electric car, it's also fundamentally a better car than most other cars. But you can do this with anything, right? Like if you think about someone taking a flight to a beach holiday, maybe you create a holiday experience that's accessible by train. That's
Yeah.
so much better that you don't miss the flight to the far off beach. And so it's both things. It's tackling climate change, but it's also being innovative and thinking about how to make these
Mm.
experiences just better for everyone so that they have
Th-
many reasons to come towards it.
this is why culture, movies, influencers have such a big role to play, because we're all like looking to have some fun, and if having some fun is to go surf at the other side of the world because that's what's cool and that's what you see on Instagram, then that's what you're going to want to be doing. Being if having a fun time is renting a bike and going to the park, and like it is a fun, like honestly it is a fun thing, but if we're not writing those stories that this is an exciting life to be living, then it's going to be hard to move to this new model that we should be moving towards. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of a new story to be told. I'm honestly a bit scared of this because I don't see this coming anytime soon, where people are excited about Teslas because it's a cool car and it's electric and it moves fast and it's autonomous and whatever. But we should also be thinking of a new lifestyle where having a car is not necessarily is not necessary. Like you could have a bike and that's a cool life to be living. You don't necessarily need a car. That's the life we should be moving towards. Having a car, having an electric car is better than having a fossil like a classical car, but having a bike is even better. And that's the story we should be telling.
Yeah, I was reading somewhere that at the end of a bike ride, people's stress level is usually lower than it was when they started. But actually, at the end of a drive, it's often higher because
Yeah,
of traffic. And I can't fully remember what the study said, but it's like your personality when you're walking and you're bicycling is similar in the sense if someone's in front of you, you aren't necessarily going to push them. You're going to try and give way to them and work around each other. But when you're driving, people's personalities fundamentally change. They become much
yeah,
more angry. They're not willing to give way. It actually changes. So there is also a bit of psychology where it's you're actually mentally better off outside
yeah.
of a car, which is quite interesting.
And it's better for your health. It's better
Yeah,
for so many things. So yeah, we should be selling the benefits of having this new lifestyle more than criticizing the bad things about our current lifestyle. That's probably a good way to bring in some change.
that's a great thought. I guess to close everything out, I'd love to hear from you as a young climate founder yourself. If there are other people here, at any stage in their career who care about climate change, are motivated to do something, what would be your advice to get them to just take step one and start their journey and creating either an organization, could be a business, could be an NGO, could be anything to help tackle climate change?
Welcome to this new beautiful sector. You're gonna have some fun. This is the first message, I guess. I think one of the good things I did from the get-go is to speak to a bunch of people, especially consultants that work in the sustainability sector, because they're working with companies today who are looking to transform their models to be more environmentally friendly. So what I did is I spoke to consultants, I spoke to friends, and I said to them like, "Hey, what are the big insights? What are the big trends of your sector, and what needs to be happening?" And that's a good way to have some ideas and to meet people and to have some introductions. So I think that's a good start. And honestly, if you talk to people about their passion, they're going to be happy to talk to you. So don't be afraid to ask for help, even if you're looking for like people who are pretty senior. If you're just saying like, "Hey, I'm interested in this subject. I would love to speak to you for 30 minutes. And would you be available?" Most people will say yes. And that's pretty cool. So that's the first step. And then I would look into startup studios or job offers, or you don't necessarily have to build your own company. There's a bunch of big companies or startups who are looking to build some new branches, some new startups inside of a startup, and you can have a entrepreneurial experience within the climate sector, not necessarily by building something new. Sometimes, and I'm still thinking about this for my own company. we don't necessarily need to be building new companies every time. We can join a new project that's already having impact, and there's a lot of great startups that are growing, that are hiring for roles that are very entrepreneurial, and you can have sort of the best of both worlds with an entrepreneurial experience, but a salary that comes every end of the month, and working towards this exciting sector.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Alban. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me. Great questions. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, if I can do whatever, I'm happy to help. LinkedIn is a good way, honestly. Or I can give you my email if you want to put it in the description also.
Yeah, so how about I will put your email and LinkedIn link in the description, and
Yep.
anyone can get in touch.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening in. If you enjoyed the conversation, please consider subscribing and tuning in to future episodes. See you around.